Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Live with Astronomer. So the point of this series is to really just go into some use case driven case studies almost of new releases with airflow, ways you can get more out of airflow, and just giving the public a greater awareness of, hey, what is something, what is a new feature that's come out, but then also how can I do something productive with it? We don't just want to implement features for the sake of features, but when it has a really powerful outcome, then we're going to want to talk about it. So think of them as like developer-centric airflow topics. And so for today, start out with what I'd like to go through is just some of the features that were released in the latest 2.6 update and how they can make your pipelines a little bit better. So the first feature I wanted to go into was the new continuous timetable. And so what the continuous timetable allows you to do is have a DAG that is always running. So great use case for it right here is if, let's say, you have a sensor that every time a file is deposited in a location, you want to take that file and run some transformations on it or go store it in a database. And that file is only generated irregularly. So a typical time-based schedule wouldn't really work. And maybe it's not a data set, so you can't use data-aware scheduling. So with a continuous schedule, which is implemented just by setting the schedule as @continuous in the typical schedule param, then you can see that every time one of these DAG runs ends, a new one is generated. So that's why there are upwards of, you'll see like 34,000 DAG runs for this particular DAG. So if you want to have a sensor that is constantly running, but you don't necessarily just want to use a typical sensor setup, continuous timetable is an amazing use case for it. And another really cool feature that was released is kind of an expansion of the new trigger function within Airflow. And now you have, a way to asynchronously trigger DAGs where you don't have to take a worker slot for a sensor. And so what's happening in this DAG is we're just waiting 10 seconds, then triggering an external DAG run. So not actually within this DAG, but an external DAG. So this is great, if you want to chain different DAGs together, but you want them to be loosely coupled. And the way you would implement that is just by using this new trigger DAG run operator, where you just put in your task ID, trigger DAG ID. So the DAG that you want to trigger, sleep time, wait for completion, and whether it's deferrable or not. So this is the new feature here, as well as its poke interval. So if we then go to this downstream trigger DAG run, you will see that it is getting triggered externally. And what that looks like, code is just being triggered so there's no actual schedule here. It's just being triggered from an external source. Next function I want to talk about is a little in the weeds, but it is pretty cool, where now you can directly read and print JSON and YAML files using a JSON and YAML macro. So if we just first look at the implementation of the code, you have the ability now to say, hey, for a JSON file, just display it as a macro, which just turns it into a readable data set. So then if you go into the outputs of these tasks, the logs, you can see those files being printed out here. So just easier way to reference and work with JSON and YAML files. And the next feature is max task instances per DAG run. So here, if we look at the graph, you can see 11, but you have now an ability to set a upper bound on the dynamism. So if you're using task mapping, but you want it to be able to generate tasks dynamically, but not over a certain threshold, that's where you can have max task instances per DAG run, where it will limit the total amount of task instances that a map task can create. You can do that either at DAG run level or max task instances per DAG. And you can also see we're expanding that here. And the next feature is the notifiers. And so notifiers are amazing in that you no longer need to handwrite all the logic for setting up things like Slack notifications into all of your DAGs. Now, what you can do is use let me separate one. I want to go to the notifier Slack DAG. So here you can see I'm selecting my connection ID, channel, message, and then I'm using the Slack notifier function here. So you can see this is actually within the task arguments body, where I'm saying on success callback, use the Slack notifier to send me a Slack alert through this Slack connection, this channel, and using this message format. So you can use Jinja templating so it can read, dynamic information about each task instance and then surface it within that channel. So super useful function for just extending notifications across all of your DAGs without it just being a massive lift to actually hard code them in every DAG, which is just obviously very hard to maintain over time. So that's one example. You also have other options where you can have things like a notifier, where this is actually writing files to an include folder. So it'll tell you, hey, this is the file path of that file related to the notification here. So while you do have pre-built Slack notifiers and email notifiers, you can build your own if you want to have your own custom logic in there. And then it's still extensible in that you can write that notifier and then call it in all of your DAGs. The next feature to talk about, and this is one that I'm personally really excited about as a former data scientist from another life, is, sorry, not retry example, but being able to pass pandas data frames as an XCOM. So no longer do you need to transform your pandas data frame back to data set and then store it in between tasks. Now you can push a pandas data frame from one task and then pull it into another. So if we look at the outcome of pull df PDDF, go in the logs, you can see it printing out the outcome of this previous data frame that was created in an older task. Now, the next one is just retry examples. So having ability to now set just more granular custom retry logic. So you can have larger maximum retry task delay, and then kind of implemented here where you have different batch commands passing it and then different retry delays as well. So just small upgrade, but just important if you have really long retry delays for really long running sensors. And one of the final features I want to show you, and this is just a cool fun one, is triggering DAGs with params directly from the UI. So now you can pass context commands, and you'll see they're just default parameters where I can pass in my dog name, Piglet, the data dog, now how many treats I want to give him, and if he's happy pre-treats. And so you can see what the generated configuration JSON is going to be passed to the DAG is here. You can also select previous configurations from previous DAG runs and hit trigger. And this will then trigger that DAG with those parameters. So if you want to look at Piglet's state after he has been given treats, you will see Piglet even happier now. So happy for all of us. Now, final one, UI features. This is really just to show you the updated and now integrated graph view with the grid view. So now instead of needing to constantly click between graph and grid, you have them side by side where you get that, really easy to monitor concurrent DAGs with the, or concurrent tasks with the grid view, seeing the completion time, but then also you have the graph view here. So you can see how they all relate to each other. And another cool thing here is the ability now to filter tasks. So I could look at all tasks that are upstream of a particular task, downstream, upstream and downstream. And so this gives you the ability to now, for those really, really large DAGs, be able to cut into just the portion of the DAG that you want to look at and the relationships there. So just giving you better visibility into enterprise grade DAGs. And that is really all the features fit to write in the Airflow 2.6 upgrade. And so if anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat. I would love to chat, but if you don't, thanks for showing up for the first Live with Astronomer, and hope to see you again soon next week.